I'm very excited today to introduce to you therapist Taylor Anderson. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist in Miami, Florida, where she offers premarital and married couples the knowledge and skills required to not just survive marriage, but to thrive. I love that. Her company is called Marital Mindset Therapy. You were known as a helper or a peacekeeper even as a child. And that makes me wonder, in addition to leading you into fields that are known as helping fields, professions, do you have to guard against codependent tendencies?
I think it's an interesting question. And I think for a lot of therapists, what I've found just connecting with other therapists is that we often have that same origin story of being the
Yes.
helper, the peacekeeper, the healer in a sense. I'm a true Enneagram 2 helper all the
Uh-huh.
way through. So
Uh-huh.
I think it can present challenges and that there always is that desire to want to help and want to step in and kind of help bring people together. And so there can be a little bit of codependency, or you kind of have to watch for that because you don't want to involve yourself too much often when it
Yes.
comes to those close relationships. And I think too, being a therapist, you always have friends or family members who want to come to you for advice, just based off of the experience that you have in the field. And I always have to kind of tell them too, it's so much different when you're giving advice to someone a friend or a family member versus sitting with a couple where it's, that unbiased situation. So, yeah, that's a great question.
Well, I ask it because I've been a coach for almost 30 years, and
Mhm.
I've had to guard or caught myself when I've become more emotionally involved in the situation than is good for me or them.
Right.
I love that you use assessment tools to help you expose unrealistic expectations in either engaged or married couples. What are your favorite tools?
So I am a prepare enrich facilitator, which is a
Mm-hmm.
premarital assessment that I offer couples usually before we start our work together. And I also am a SYMBIS facilitator, and SYMBIS stands for Save Your Marriage Before It Starts.
Yes.
So, although both of those assessments are really geared toward premarital couples, they can be used with married couples as well. But I love that it really gives this comprehensive kind of snapshot of where the couple are at whatever stage in their relationship. And it really kind of gives you that insight before you start working with them into what's their mindset, what are their expectations, what are their strengths and their growth areas. And I think really giving the couple the opportunity to have that awareness and insight, and then also to do skills building on top of that
Yes.
assessment data can be really, really helpful for couples.
Exposing unrealistic expectations would prevent a lot of trouble later on, right?
Yes.
Many believe they cannot marry until they find the perfect partner or their soulmate. What is really true from your point of view?
It's a hard one because I know from my personal experience growing up, I think I had a little bit of that romantic mindset. The SYMBIS
Mm-hmm.
assessment actually uncovers some of those mindsets where it's a romantic, a realistic, idealistic type of mindset. And so growing up, I think I did have a little bit of that romantic mindset. So I absolutely understand the desire to want to feel like there's that one true soulmate for you and person that you're meant to be with. I think one thing that I would say is sometimes that can be an unrealistic expectation in the sense that it puts a lot of pressure on your spouse or your partner to feel
Yes.
that they can meet all of those needs. And so, what I usually say, I think, especially in the social media age that we have now. We're so exposed to the highlight reel of other relationships. And I think it can become easy to compare and see these bits and pieces of other relationships, the positive aspects usually,
Yes.
and to feel that, oh, there must be something missing from my partner or my marriage, and what is it that's missing, or maybe it's not my true soulmate or perfect partner. And so I think that especially now it can be really challenging to get out of that mindset. And the reality is we're all imperfect, right? So
Yes.
there is no perfect spouse or any perfect marriage. And it's really about two imperfect people coming together and making that dedication and committed choice to work on the relationship and move forward.
I find that when couples are in the middle of conflict, the temptation is to think, "Oh, I married the wrong person,"
Mm,
and
mhm.
it would turn out to be true. No matter who you married, there's going to be conflict and things that we
Absolutely.
both need to learn and grow from. So you stated that it's a misconception that the learning about each other only happens before marriage. What do you mean by that?
I think when couples initially come together, I think there's so much emphasis on learning about your partner, asking all of those questions. And of course, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's incredibly important when you're dating and
Yes.
when you're engaged to determine if it's someone that you can make that commitment with. But I do feel that a lot of times couples can feel that after the wedding day, things will kind of just sort themselves out, and it will just kind of happen naturally that you stay in touch with who your partner is, who they're
Mm-hmm.
becoming, who you're becoming. And we all inevitably will evolve and change as individuals. And so that changes the relationship as well. So I like to challenge couples to continue that dating period after the wedding day, and also to continue getting to know one another. I think sometimes it can happen that if you stop learning about your partner, one day you kind of wake up and you're like, who is this
Mm-hmm.
person? What
Yes.
happened to our relationship? How does it look so different now than it did, several years ago? And so I think continuing to learn about one another after the wedding day is really key for that.
My belief is that courtship should last forever.
Yes. I absolutely agree with you.
You say that, and I'm quoting you, romance is kept alive by intention and effort. What does that look like in your own marriage?
Oh goodness. So it has looked different over different stages. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a toddler now, and so right now that's being very intentional about scheduling date nights and scheduling time for ourselves. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
before we had a child, we had so much more freedom and flexibility. So I
Yes.
think, depending on our needs at the time, what stressors we have going on with work or other demands, I think it can look very different. But I think being very intentional about setting aside the time, and also being very intentional about that time as well, putting our phones down and really kind of
Mm-hmm.
tuning in to one another, and having that dedicated time is really important.
I love hearing you say put the phones down so that your focus is on each other. So many times when couples have children, the children become the sole focus of their relationship and they lose touch with each other. So I'm really glad you used that as an example. For instance, when couples fight about money, as one topic that's frequently fought over, what are they really fighting about?
That's a great question. And it's such a common conflict area for couples. And I think because a lot of times it can be oversimplified, it can become just an expression of you save too much or you spend too much. And how
Mm-hmm.
is that affecting our relationship, our goals, our dreams? And so we're really not just talking about the numbers, we're actually talking about all of those expectations that are tied to money,
Mm-hmm.
beliefs around money, and also our past experiences with money as well. what experiences did we have with finances in our family of origin growing up as a
Yes.
child? Did you have painful experiences around money where maybe the electricity was shut off because bills weren't paid? Or did you have positive experiences around money where you were able to enjoy these experiences or vacations, things that are very meaningful to you? And so I think sometimes when couples oversimplify the issue of finances and just look at the surface of
Mhm.
spending too much or saving too much or too little, I think it becomes challenging for them. So I do offer for couples to really and encourage them to get curious about each other's
Mhm.
experiences and beliefs related to money.
Curiosity is such an important quality to use in a marriage. Rather than the opposite of curiosity is judgment,
Mm-hmm.
and judgment doesn't work.
Right,
I
right.
love that you say the goal of healthy listening is to understand, not just to wait for your chance to reply. How do you teach your clients to listen better for the purpose of understanding?
I think really focusing on the mindset and the way that couples see and view communication. I think sometimes when couples think about communication, there is that tendency to feel like, okay, it's about what I'm sharing, what I'm
Yes.
communicating. But half of communication isn't what you're doing with your mouth, it's what you're doing with your
Yes.
ears. And
Yes.
so, really making that space and time for listening and being very intentional. And so sometimes we'll go through exercises with couples, assertiveness and active listening,
Mm-hmm.
and practicing sharing your needs, but also pausing a moment and waiting to hear your partner and really understand their experience and where they're coming from. So that way, you hopefully have more empathy for their position or
Mm-hmm.
experience as well. So we go through some formal exercises like that, but I think really just reframing the whole mindset around communication and its purpose. Conflict can be a really challenging part of a relationship, but it also can be an obstacle for growth and that increased understanding that can really take your relationship to the next level as well.
Do you find clients have some resistance to practicing active listening, where they actually repeat back what their partner's saying?
I think sometimes in session, it can feel a bit challenging, a bit awkward, kind
Mm-hmm.
of placing those boundaries around communication and the conversation. And it's not something that naturally we're accustomed to. I think a lot of the times when it comes to conflict, we're thinking about how can I win this?
Yes.
How
Yes.
can I win on this issue? And really, the goal at the end of the day is not for one person to win, but for the relationship to
Relationship.
win. And so, although I tell couples it feels a bit forced, it feels a bit awkward practicing it that way in session, it
Mm-hmm.
will bring kind of ring alarm bells for in the real world when they're at home and they're in this discussion to say, okay, hold on, let me pause for a minute. Let me slow down and hear what my partner is saying first before I try to respond with my own position or thoughts.
We all want so badly to be heard. You know, you hear me first and then I'll hear you. So
Yes.
it's a real kind of an adult grown up stance to take. Okay, I'm willing to hear you first, and then
Mm-hmm.
I hope to be heard. How do you describe or define a resilient mindset in marriage?
So I define resilience as the ability to adapt to challenges. And I think the first step in cultivating a resilient mindset is understanding that the challenges will arise. Difficult experiences, difficult emotions will come up in marriage inevitably.
Mm-hmm.
Conflict is inevitable. And so, first, understanding and accepting that those challenging experiences will exist. But then taking it a step further to also knowing those challenging moments won't last forever if both partners are really willing to step in and work
Mhm.
toward a common goal together. I know for my husband and I, when we had our first baby and we're coming up with all of these new challenges with
Yes.
childcare and navigating both of our careers. And it was a really difficult time. And when you're in it, it feels like, oh, this feels like it will just last forever. But
Uh-huh.
I think when you have a resilient mindset, you know, okay, this is another season that we're in, and it's not something that's going to last forever if we're both willing to work toward our common goal.
Okay, great. Great definition. You mentioned that the very qualities in your husband that irritate you at times are also the qualities that bring balance to your relationship. Are you free to share an example?
Sure, sure. I think probably the biggest one that comes to mind is I tend to be a little bit more cautious. I'm a recovering perfectionist. So
Okay.
I'm really adverse sometimes when it comes to taking risks. I have that fear of failure at times, of making
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. My husband is polar opposite. He is not risk adverse. He is
Uh-huh.
just willing to push the boundaries, do whatever it takes. And so sometimes I think with that difference in our personalities, there is the potential for conflict because he's ready to just jump straight in, and I'm kind of
Mm-hmm.
just putting my toes in the water, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, that has really brought a lot of balance to our relationship, as you mentioned, and growth as well. It has pushed each of us out of our comfort zones in different ways, which I
Mm-hmm.
think has been really helpful. Once we've had the mindset to accept it and kind of grow from that and not let it just become an irritation or annoyance.
I appreciate that example, and it's a common one, isn't it? With couples, we
Mm,
often are attracted to our opposite and then we resent the fact that they're so
yes.
opposite. Thank you for what you've shared on this video interview. If you'd like to contact Taylor, you can at her website, which is maritalmindsetcounseling.com, or on Instagram at the marital mindset. And I hope you'll read the full article where she gives a lot of wonderful tips about successful marriage. Thank you so much for joining me today, Taylor. And I hope that someday we get to meet more in person, not just on Zoom.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
You have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye bye.